The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before the crew of the Voyager. Stars blinked like distant beacons, guiding their journey through the unknown. Commander Jace Thorne sat in the command chair, his fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the armrest. They were heading into uncharted territory, an ancient galaxy believed to be home to the Ancient Ones. These beings, long thought extinct, had once ruled a vast empire. Their warnings echoed through the archives, warnings about humanity. "Stay away from humans," they'd said, their message buried in forgotten texts scattered across the universe. For millennia, no one had taken those words seriously. Now, as the Voyager ventured closer to the heart of the Ancient One's domain, the crew was about to discover why they should have. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound in the dark command center. Jace's eyes were fixed on the star map in front of him, the route to their destination clearly marked. But there was something unsettling in the air. The Ancient Ones had vanished long ago, but their warnings had remained. "Humanity is dangerous," the message had stated. "Their hunger for power and knowledge will be their undoing." "Commander, we're entering the system." Lieutenant Ava Kessler's voice broke through the silence. She was the navigator, sharp and precise. "We should be approaching the coordinates any minute now." Jace nodded. "Keep a close eye on the sensors. We can't afford any surprises." A few tense minutes passed before the ship's artificial intelligence, Aura, chimed in. "Commander Thorne, I am detecting unusual energy signatures in the vicinity. The readings are off the charts." Jace stood up, his attention snapping to the holographic display. A cluster of strange signals appeared in the system, all centered around a massive, broken planet, once the heart of the Ancient One's empire. The planet's surface was scorched, the remains of cities visible even from space. "What's the source of the energy?" Jace asked, his voice steady, though a flicker of concern crept into his mind. "Unclear," Aura responded. "However, it's unlike anything I've encountered before. It's as though the planet itself is alive." "Alive?" Jace repeated, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The AI's voice dropped in pitch, more urgent now. "It's as if the planet is reacting to our presence." "Prepare for descent," Jace ordered. "Get us to the surface. We need answers." As the Voyager descended through the atmosphere, the crew braced themselves for what awaited them. The planet's surface was barren, ash-covered plains stretching for miles, interspersed with jagged mountains that seemed to reach for the sky like the fingers of a dead giant. The remnants of what might have once been grand cities lay scattered, their ruins now nothing more than haunted skeletons of a long-gone civilization. The ship landed with a soft thud, the engines powering down. Jay stood, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The message of the Ancient Ones had always intrigued him, but now, seeing the remains of their world, it felt far more real, far more dangerous than he could have imagined. "We're here," he said, glancing at his team. "Stay sharp. Whatever we find, we'll face it together." Ava, always calm under pressure, nodded. "Understood, Commander." Jace took a deep breath. The air was thin but breathable, though a strange, unsettling cold seeped into his bones. The team, armed and prepared, began to disembark. The ruins around them seemed to whisper, as if the very ground was alive with ancient memories. But there was no time to dwell on the eerie feeling. They had a mission: uncover the secrets hidden on this forsaken world. But in the back of his mind, Jace couldn't shake the warning from the Ancient Ones. Stay away from humans. Why? What had they feared about his species? As they walked deeper into the ruins, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over the team. The structures ahead were massive, towering walls covered in strange markings, symbols none of them recognized. The wind howled through the jagged stone, and in the distance, they heard a faint hum, a rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. "Do you hear that?" Sergeant Marcus, the team's security officer, asked, his voice low. Everyone stopped. The hum was faint but unmistakable. "Stay alert," Jace ordered, his heart pounding. "That sound, it's coming from deeper inside." The group pressed forward, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Each step felt heavier than the last. The deeper they went, the stronger the pulse became. It was as if someone was watching them. They reached the heart of the ruins, where a massive door stood. Its surface was covered in glowing symbols, words Jace couldn't decipher, but the feeling of dread intensified. "Let's open it," Jace said, though his voice was tinged with hesitation. He didn't know why, but he had a sinking feeling. They had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. The door slid open with a grinding noise, revealing a chamber bathed in unnatural light. At the center stood a massive pedestal, and atop it, a glowing object, pulsing with energy. Suddenly, the voice of the Ancient Ones echoed through the chamber, cold and foreboding. "Too late," it said. "You should have listened." The air inside the chamber was thick, heavy with an ancient power that pressed against their skin. Commander Jace Thorne's heart raced as his eyes locked on the glowing object resting upon the pedestal. Its light was mesmerizing, flickering like a dying star. For a brief moment, he wondered if it had been waiting for them. But before he could process the thought, a chill ran down his spine. The voice, the cold, mechanical tone of the Ancient Ones, echoed once more, reverberating through the chamber. "Too late. You should have listened." Jace's instinct screamed at him to retreat, to leave this forsaken place and never look back. But his legs felt like they were made of stone. He could hear his breath, shallow and ragged, as if the very air itself was suffocating him. "Commander," Lieutenant Ava Kessler whispered, her voice strained. "What is that thing?" "It's alive." Jace forced himself to take a step forward. The glow from the pedestal pulsed, matching the erratic beat of his heart. He wanted to turn back, but he couldn't. Something deep within him, something primal, told him that they had crossed a point of no return. This was it. The secrets of the Ancient Ones lay in front of them, and if they didn't understand what it was, the consequences could be catastrophic. "Stay sharp," Jace ordered, his voice steady but tense. "We're not leaving until we figure this out." The team spread out, their weapons drawn but lowered, a mix of tension and curiosity in the air. As they approached the pedestal, the hum grew louder, vibrating in their bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a sensation, a pulse of energy that felt like it was reaching deep into their souls. "We need to touch it," Sergeant Marcus said, his voice low and cautious. "It's the only way to understand it." Jace turned to him, his jaw tight. "Are you sure about this? We don't know what it is or what it does." Marcus's eyes were locked on the object, his gaze unwavering. "We came here for answers, sir. It's the only way." Reluctantly, Jace nodded. If they were going to get any answers, this was their only shot. Marcus took a cautious step forward, his hand outstretched toward the glowing artifact. The moment his fingers brushed against its surface, the hum turned into a violent roar. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air in the chamber seemed to warp, distorting with energy. The glow from the pedestal blazed brighter, illuminating the walls in a dizzying flash of light. "Get back," Jace shouted, his voice commanding as he grabbed Ava's arm and yanked her away from the pedestal. The rest of the team scrambled to retreat, but it was too late. The object began to tremble, and then it split open with a deafening crack, revealing a swirling vortex of energy at its core. Before anyone could react, the ground erupted beneath them. A burst of force sent them sprawling to the floor, the chamber shaking violently. The pedestal shattered, and the air was filled with a sound unlike anything they had ever heard, a mix of screams and whispers, ancient and incomprehensible. "Commander," Ava yelled, struggling to regain her footing. "What the hell is happening?" Jace's mind raced. He tried to gather his thoughts, but the chamber was collapsing around them. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with the same energy they had just unleashed. The vortex continued to grow, sucking the air out of the room, pulling everything toward it with terrifying force. "Everyone get to the exit," Jace shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. He didn't need to say more. His team was already moving, instinctively heading for the door. But as they reached it, it slammed shut with a resounding crash. "No way out," Marcus yelled, pounding on the door with his fists. "We're trapped." Jace looked back at the vortex. It was no longer just an energy field. Within it, Something began to take shape. A figure tall and towering, made of pure light and shadow, slowly emerged from the swirling mass. It was massive, almost otherworldly, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through them. It was like a creature from nightmares, a being older than time itself. The voice of the Ancient Ones boomed once again, this time with a terrifying clarity. "You are fools," the voice echoed, shaking the very ground beneath them. "You have awakened what should have stayed asleep." Jace's heart skipped a beat. The warning. It was all coming true. The Ancient Ones had warned them. Humans should never have been allowed to enter this place, to disturb the power that lay dormant here. They had unleashed something far beyond their understanding, and now they were going to pay the price. "Get ready," Jace barked, raising his weapon, though he knew it would do little against what was coming. "We fight our way out of here." The massive figure lunged toward them, its body rippling with dark energy. It wasn't alive in the way they understood life. It was something far worse, a force of nature, a remnant of an ancient civilization, now reawakened and furious. Before Jace could give another command, the room was flooded with a searing light. The blast knocked them off their feet, sending them tumbling back. Everything around them seemed to warp, the world bending, twisting. The air burned with an intensity that threatened to tear them apart. And then everything went dark. The darkness was suffocating. Jace's senses were disoriented, his body numb as if he were floating in a void. The world felt unreal, a nightmare with no end. He tried to move, but his limbs refused to respond. He couldn't remember what had happened, the blast, the creature, but he could still hear it. A low hum, deep and vibrating, like an ancient engine coming to life. Slowly, his vision began to return, hazy at first, then clearing. The chamber was gone. The pedestal, the vortex, the monstrous figure, they were all gone. In their place was a cold, infinite expanse. A dark sky stretched above him, void of stars, and the ground was cracked and lifeless, like the remains of some forgotten world. "Jace." The voice cut through the eerie silence, low and strained. "Ava." His eyes snapped open, and he saw her lying next to him, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Ava." Jace croaked, his voice rough from the blow. "What happened?" We were hit by something," she gasped, pushing herself up slowly. "I thought we were done for. Where are we?" Jace looked around, his mind racing. This wasn't the chamber they'd just been in. It didn't even feel like the same reality. This place, wherever it was, felt wrong. "Where's the rest of the team?" he asked, his heart pounding. Ava shook her head. "I don't know. I can't reach them, everything's scattered. We were separated when we got knocked out." Jay stood, his body aching with the effort. The ground beneath him felt unstable, as if it were shifting with each step he took. He didn't have time to process everything. They needed to find the others, figure out what had happened, and get out of this place before whatever had attacked them came back. "We have to move," Jay said, his voice sharp and determined. "Stay close. We need to find the others." They moved quickly, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the rest of their team. The sky above them seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, like the heartbeat of the world itself. It was an oppressive feeling, one that made the hairs on the back of Jace's neck stand up. The silence was unnerving. There were no sounds of life, no birds, no wind, nothing to indicate that this place had ever known life at all. It felt like a graveyard, the remains of something long forgotten. And then, in the distance, Jace saw something. A flicker of movement. His heart leaped into his throat, and he motioned for Ava to follow him. They moved cautiously, each step deliberate as they approached the source of the movement. When they reached the edge of a vast cracked chasm, they found Marcus, still unconscious, but alive. His body was sprawled on the ground, blood trickling from a wound on his forehead. Jace knelt beside him, checking for signs of life. "He's breathing," Jace muttered, relieved but still worried. "We need to get him back to the others." Ava nodded, but before they could lift Marcus, a loud, guttural roar echoed through the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Jace's blood ran cold. "What the hell was that?" Ava whispered, her voice shaking. Jace looked up, his eyes scanning the horizon. Far in the distance he saw a figure, towering and monstrous, moving toward them with unnatural speed. It was humanoid in shape but twisted. Its features were obscured by the shadows that clung to its form, but its presence was undeniable. "Run!" Jace barked, lifting Marcus and motioning for Ava to follow. "We don't have time for this." They ran, the sound of the creature's steps shaking the ground beneath them. It was closing in, and Jace could feel the weight of its malice in every step it took. They had to get out of this place. They had to survive. But as they neared the edge of the chasm, they were met with a wall of energy, a force field of some kind, blocking their escape. Jace slammed his fists against it, feeling the vibrations course through his body. "It's not going to hold," Ava said, her voice tight with panic. "We're trapped." Jace cursed under his breath. They were running out of options. The creature was getting closer, and they had no way to fight it, no way to escape. "We need to make a stand," Jace said, gritting his teeth. "We fight." Ava nodded, her face grim. She was ready, but they both knew the odds. They were outmatched, outclassed. As the creature drew closer, it let out another deafening roar, the sound rattling their bones. Jace's mind raced, searching for anything, any weapon, any way to fight back. But there was nothing. No tools. No reinforcements. Just the three of them, stuck in a place that defied every law of nature. And then, just as the creature lunged, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the sky, blinding them. A shockwave sent them crashing to the ground, and for a moment everything was silent. When the light faded, the creature was gone. The chasm was gone. Everything was gone, except for one thing. A voice older than time itself resonated in their minds. "You should have stayed away from them." Jace's heart stopped. It wasn't over. It had just begun. Jace blinked against the searing light, his senses overwhelmed by the sudden change. His chest was tight, and his breath came in short, ragged bursts as he pushed himself up from the cracked earth. His mind raced, the blinding flash still fresh in his vision. What had just happened? Where were they now? He glanced around. The vast, lifeless chasm was gone, replaced by what seemed to be an entirely different world. The sky above was still dark, but the air felt charged, as if some unseen force was vibrating through every atom of his body. There were no creatures, no monstrous beings pursuing them, but the silence was deafening. Ava stood beside him, her eyes wide, scanning the surroundings with the same wariness. She was pale, covered in dirt and sweat, but there was a determination in her eyes. "What just happened?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Jace opened his mouth, but before he could respond, a faint hum broke the silence. It was low at first, a subtle vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself. He stood straighter, his instincts on edge. Something wasn't right. Then the voice came again. This time, it was clearer. "You should have stayed away from them," it echoed in their minds. Cold, ancient, and filled with an unsettling finality. Jace's heart raced. This wasn't just some ambient noise, it was a warning, one that echoed with an unspoken weight, like a threat that carried the weight of millennia. His eyes darted to Ava, who looked as unnerved as he felt. "We need to get out of here," Jace said, voice tight. "Whatever this is, we're not meant to be here." Ava nodded, but before they could move, the ground beneath their feet trembled again. This time, the vibrations were stronger, almost violent, shaking loose chunks of the strange, metallic earth beneath them. The hum grew louder, the energy in the air thickening like a storm ready to burst. "Jace," Ava's voice quivered. "Something's coming." Jace barely had time to react when the horizon flickered. At first it looked like a mirage, a distorted ripple in the air, but then it solidified into something more terrifying. A massive structure, towering above them, seemingly materializing out of nowhere. It was unlike anything Jace had ever seen, massive, intricate, and ancient, with geometries that defied reason, its surface shifting and writhing like it had a life of its own. And standing in front of it, as if summoned by the very fabric of the world itself, was a figure, tall, cloaked in shadow, and radiating a sense of sheer power. It didn't look human or even alien in the traditional sense. It was something older, something far beyond comprehension. Jace's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" Jace demanded, stepping forward, his hand on his sidearm. But he knew this was no ordinary threat. No amount of weaponry could possibly deal with something like this. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised its hand, and the air around them shifted. The world seemed to warp, bending to its will as the space around them grew heavier, denser. A surge of energy crackled in the atmosphere, and Jace staggered backward, his legs buckling beneath him. "You are treading in forbidden territory," the voice rumbled, no longer a whisper, but a deep, resonant sound that shook him to his core. "You were warned." Jace swallowed hard, his mind racing for answers. This being, this entity, it wasn't here by chance. It was a guardian, a sentinel of sorts. But why? Why now? Ava stood frozen beside him, eyes wide with terror and awe. "Jace, what do we do?" "We stay calm," Jace whispered, his eyes never leaving the figure. "We don't provoke it. Not unless we have no choice." The figure's gaze turned toward them, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It seemed to study them, as if weighing their very existence. "You have crossed the threshold," it intoned. "The Ancient Ones warned humanity to stay away. And yet you came." Jace's pulse quickened as the weight of its words hit him. The Ancient Ones. The very beings that had been mentioned in the warnings. Warnings that now seemed to carry more weight than ever. "What do you want?" Jace managed, his voice defiant despite the fear creeping up his spine. "We didn't come here to cause trouble." The figure tilted its head, its form shimmering, as if it were made of smoke. "Trouble," it repeated, its voice filled with disdain. "You do not understand. Humanity is a threat. You always were. You cannot be allowed to unravel the forces you do not comprehend." Jace's mind raced. A threat? How were they a threat? They were explorers, just trying to understand what was out there. But whatever this entity was, it saw them differently. "You think you can challenge the stars," the figure continued. "But there are things far older than your species, older than the galaxy itself. You have only just begun to awaken them, and for that, you will pay the price." Ava stepped forward, her voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" The figure didn't answer immediately. It raised his hand again, and this time, the air around them grew colder, darker, as if the very atmosphere were closing in. "You will leave this place," it said, its voice now cold and final. "Return to your world. Forget what you have seen, or the price will be far steeper than you can imagine." Jace's mind raced. They couldn't leave, not without answers. But the threat in the figure's voice was clear. They had trespassed on something ancient, something beyond their understanding. He glanced at Ava. "We need to get out. Now." Before they could move, the figure extended a hand toward them, and in an instant, they were swept away. Jace gasped as his body was hurled through space. His vision blurred, his limbs flailing against forces beyond comprehension. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced, not falling, not flying, but displaced, as if reality itself was rejecting him. Then, suddenly, he slammed into solid ground. His breath came in ragged gulps as he pushed himself up, his head spinning. Ava was beside him, coughing, disoriented but alive. Around them, the world had changed again. They were no longer in the presence of the cloaked figure or the shifting, metallic landscape. Instead, they were inside what looked like an ancient chamber, its walls lined with glowing runes pulsing with a deep, rhythmic energy. Ava's wide eyes met his. "Jace, what just happened?" He didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing. The being had chosen to transport them here, which meant this place held something important. The air was thick with something old. Not just in age, but in weight, in meaning. The chamber wasn't just stone, it was something alive. The runes shifted slightly as they walked, like whispers crawling at the edges of their perception. Then, the voice returned. "You were warned," it echoed around them. "And yet you persist." Jace's fists clenched. "Who are you? What is this place?" The shadows in the chamber twisted, and from the darkness, the figure emerged again. This time, its form was clearer. It was humanoid but not. Its body was both solid and ethereal, shifting like it was caught between realities. Its eyes burned with an ancient, impossible knowledge. "You stand in the vault of the forgotten," the figure intoned. "A place not meant for your kind." Ava took a hesitant step forward. "If we weren't meant to be here, why bring us?" For a moment, the being was silent. Then it spoke, slowly, deliberately. "Because it is already too late." Jace felt a chill run down his spine. Too late for what? The figure's gaze bore into him, and then, without warning, the chamber reacted. The runes flared, and the walls shifted, parting like a great, ancient mechanism awakening from slumber. And beyond them, a hologram. No more than that. A recording, etched into the very fabric of space and time itself. It flickered to life, showing massive celestial bodies colliding, entire galaxies bending and breaking under forces beyond comprehension. And then Jace saw them, the Ancient Ones. They were not gods, not in the way myths described, but they were something greater, beings who had existed before the stars, before even the laws of physics had settled into place. They had shaped reality, fought against things that should never have been, and then vanished. The recording played on, showing one last moment. A final, desperate warning. A towering figure, unlike the one before them, stood at the center of a ruined world. Its voice echoed through time itself. They cannot be stopped. They cannot be reasoned with. They do not hate, they only consume. The cycle will begin again. But there is one force that can resist. One anomaly in the pattern. If they awaken, there is only one chance to fight back. The figure in the recording turned, its hollow eyes staring directly at them, as if it had seen through the ages, across time itself. "Stay away from the humans. If you value your existence, do not let them awaken to what they are." The hologram ended. Silence. Jace's heart pounded in his chest. He turned to Ava, who was frozen in place, her mind racing through the implications. "They were afraid of us," she whispered. "Not because we were dangerous, but because we were the only ones who could stop whatever they fought." Jace exhaled. The Ancient Ones had warned the galaxy to stay away from humanity, not because they feared what humans were, but because of what they might become. And now the truth had been revealed. And it changed everything. The chamber was silent, but the weight of the revelation crushed Jace's thoughts. Ava stood frozen beside him, her breath shallow. The Ancient Ones warned the galaxy to stay away from humans, not because of what they were, but because of what they could become. Jace clenched his fists. If they feared us, then they knew something we don't. The cloaked figure remained still, its burning gaze locked onto them. "You were never meant to hear the truth." The cycle was supposed to continue undisturbed. Ava's voice was barely above a whisper. "But now that we know what happens next." For the first time, the figure hesitated. It tilted its head slightly, as if calculating possibilities. Then, its voice came softer, almost reverent. "Now, you make a choice." The runes in the chamber pulsed. The walls trembled, shifting, revealing something hidden beneath layers of stone. A door. No, not just a door. A seal. It thrummed with a deep, primal energy. It was ancient beyond reckoning, older than the stars themselves. And Jace could feel it. Something inside him responded to it. His pulse quickened. He took a step forward. The closer he got, the stronger the sensation became, like something deep inside him was stirring, waking up. The figure watched him closely. "Your kind was never meant to open that door. But neither were we meant to interfere. Yet here we are." Jace's fingers hovered just above the seal. He turned to Ava. "If we open this, there's no going back." Ava's gaze was unwavering. "Jace, what if this is why we're really here?" Jace swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed that this was something beyond them, beyond everything. But if the galaxy had been built on a lie, if this was the truth that had been buried for eons. He pressed his hand against the seal. A pulse of energy shot through him, searing through every nerve. His mind exploded with images, stars collapsing, wars fought in the void, civilizations wiped from existence. And at the center of it, all humans. Not as conquerors, not as destroyers, as something else entirely. The seal shattered. Light erupted from the chamber, filling the space with an impossible glow. The runes burned brighter than ever, and the ground trembled beneath them. The cloaked figure took a step back, its form flickering, as if struggling to stay anchored. Then a voice, not from the figure, not from the chamber, but from everywhere, echoed through existence itself. They have awakened. Jace's breath caught in his throat, and deep in the void, across the stars, something stirred. The warning had been ignored. The truth had been revealed. And now, the galaxy would face the consequences.